I think most of you who've been chiming in know Will Scott. He's the one of the vice presidents of Maryland Federation of Arts Board of Directors. He has PhD in art history and was a senior staffer at the National Gallery. And when we were in shutdown, in quarantine, we were trying to think about how we could connect with our community if we couldn't open the gallery. And the idea came to use Will and his expertise and his very friendly manner to talk to artists about their inspiration, their motivation, and their work. And so since April, we've been doing these on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And we've talked to painters, we've talked to sculptors, he's talked to found object artists, he's talked to wood turners, and it's really been, for someone who is not an artist, extremely fun to learn why those of you who are artists do what you do. And in preparation for Paint Annapolis, which is just under 3 weeks away, which is terrifying, we decided that we would talk this week, next week, and the following week with 3 Paint Annapolis alums. So 3 artists who have helped Paint Annapolis grow into the really important plein air event that it is. So tonight, to kick that off, we're going to talk to David Diaz, who I think, as many of you know, may be the most well-known local painter, represented by McBride's Gallery. He's been the president of the MFA Board of Directors for 9 years. It only took 3 beers to talk him into it. And so we've worked very closely together as we've grown MFA from 225 members to now we have 760, to doing basically 10 exhibitions a year to now doing about 35 exhibitions a year. So David's been right next to me going, sure, we can do that. Let's put on a show. And so I'm looking very forward to listening to their discussion. Before I turn it over, I do want to talk about Paint Annapolis. It's grown into one of the most important plein air events in the Mid-Atlantic, maybe on the Eastern Seaboard. We were supposed to host this in June, and obviously we're not able to do so. So it's had to have a couple of changes, but mostly local people know it as the week the artists show up. So we plan to have dozens of artists, some professionals from across the country, some are your neighbors that work very hard at their craft, and they'll be painting in the streets from September 20th to September 24th. And their work will be on display through October 4th in Circle Gallery at 18 State Circle. And on a pop-up that we have at 186 Main Street through October 23rd. I want to thank the sponsors of Paint Annapolis, Annapolis Subaru, PNC Bank, and National Harbor, because we could not do this without their help. And if you want to become a sponsor too, we have lots of individual sponsor levels, and you can look at the website. And so if you're a painter, come out and paint. The more the merrier. And if you're an art lover, come see the work. We'll be opening the gallery to 10 people at a time. Everybody will need masks. And we will be putting everything online every night. And remember that the best way to support an artist is to buy their art. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to, like I said, 2 of my favorite artists, David and Will.
Thanks, Joanne. And I hope that everybody paid really close attention, very close attention to what Joanne was saying about Paint Annapolis. It's become one of our signature events along with Collector's Choice. More about that at another time. I think it's really helped spur interest in plein air painting among the community at large in Annapolis, and let us all meet a lot of very interesting people who happen to be fine artists also. I've had the pleasure of being a juror for some of the single day components, and that's been really exciting for me as a photographer. And by the way, we've interviewed photographers on Will Talks too. Although Joanne, that's one of the few things I've ever heard her omit when she was making a report, but being a photographer, I had to throw that in. So today I think we have a whole lot to talk about because as you all know, at least all of you I can see on my screen, David is not only a very fine painter and fine leader of our organization, but he's a prolific painter. It seems like he never really puts his brushes down because there's always something new to see when you run into David and get a chance to talk to him or see what he's doing. So without any more balderall, very old word, I guess all of us who are English majors or a little older will know that word, but not everybody watching, I think, knows it. But anyhow, so David has been painting for a long time, and I don't really know the answer to the question that I'm about to ask him, and I hope you'll all find it interesting, as I know I will. David, I know you're from Western Maryland. I know that you taught art, in schools, and then you're now a full-time painter and have been as long as I have known you. So how did you get from point A to point B?
Point A being the teacher?
No, being in Western Maryland and a young man, you know, a kid. And so, you know, did you always paint and draw? And your father always told you get a good job, a real job, or I don't know. Tell me the story.
They were probably just happy I got a job, actually. So, actually all the time, all my life, I painted, drew, built, made things, even sculptures, which made it hard for me in college when I went to decide what that media was going to be. So I let it float for a good while, and actually became, when I became a teacher, that it even made it more difficult because you're always working with different media and teaching, and then trying to settle your head around which one is my driving force, which ended up being painting and drawing, actually. And actually I went to school because of my stats as an English major when I went to college, and I would have had a double major, except I dropped out the English part of it, you know, later on. It was just and when I did that, I thought there was going to be the registrar who said, "You can't do that. You're a junior, a rising senior." And I said, "Well, yes, I can," which she seemed to be doubtful about. But
and where was this, David? Where were you
going? I went to Frostburg. I went to a state school. And they just had incredibly good instructors. It was a turnover, and they had some drawing instructors and painting instructors in from all over the country. Potters, not the two potters we know here. They were throwing clay. So they actually, when I told my parents I was changing my major to become go into art, they were quite surprised that I didn't do it to begin with. This wasn't news to them, in other words, that I was.
What made you decide at that point to switch your whole career path? What was it about art that made you decide to drop the English major and just pursue art?
Well, I apparently I had stopped taking enough English courses, which and my counselor, who was the head of the English department, who I guess saw some future in me being there, decided I should leave the department soon if I'm not going to take more English classes, because I'd been bulking up with the art classes, and it became noted. Yeah.
Well, let me interrupt you for a minute, because this is something I did not know about you, and it's very similar to my path through undergraduate days, with a big difference at the end. I went to college intending to be an English major, and I had 9 of the 10 courses that I needed to finish that major when I was a junior, and decided I wanted to add another major subject, which was fine arts. But for me, that meant art history. And I was going to just, not take that 10th course in English. And it was my fine arts advisor who said, if you want to go to graduate school, you'll greatly improve your chance of acceptance if you have a double major. Oh. And so I took a senior seminar in Milton's Paradise Lost to finish my English major. I see some knowing smiles. For those of you who have never attempted it, it was worth doing, but I would not recommend it of free choice, if you follow my drift. So I finished both majors. Yes, it did help me get into graduate school. But back to you. So as soon as you graduated, you began teaching in the public schools?
I did. I started teaching. I taught I taught junior high first in Western Maryland. And in the wisdom of the county, I actually graduated with a fine arts degree, a BA in fine arts. And so I didn't have a teaching degree, which meant for 2 years I was a provisional teacher. The wisdom was that you had to have a 8 weeks course in student teaching that I didn't have. So if I had that one course in student teaching, I would have.
So how long did you teach in the public schools? How long did you do that before you gave that up?
32 years.
You're kidding.
No.
Well, you must have done that. You must have given it up just before I met you, because I don't remember you as a teacher. Just
right. I barely remember me as a teacher now too.
Okay, well then let's move on then. I don't need to hear about all horrible things that junior high students did to you.
No, I taught elementary too. I love teaching. I just knew that if I was going to get on with this, I needed to do it, commit to it.
Now, was there any artistic event that made you want to get on to it? I mean, did you enter a competition and won first prize, or make a big sale, or some person in the arts you really knew well and had respect for said, David, stop fooling around and start painting all the time?
Well, no, the first two things would have been grand, the big sale and the award, but no, it wasn't either of those. It was more, I was in Annapolis. I've spent most of my entire life now in Annapolis. And I watched Paint Annapolis going on. Absolutely what we were talking about at the beginning. I saw it going on thinking, well, I could do that if I had the time. And I wanted to take it. I really just wanted more time to do it.
Yeah.
And it was not something. While I really enjoyed teaching and working with kids, I really wanted to be
So Paint Annapolis, which is why we're talking to you and we're going to talk to our next two guests,
right, actually
was pivotal in your decision to devote yourself full time to painting.
Well, it helped me get it. Yes. The simple answer is yes. The simple answer is yes. And I just want, you don't have a lot of time when you're teaching to actually paint on your own, unless you are, well, let's put it this way. You can come home and be very tired and get caught up in doing something else instead of standing in front of your easel.
Yeah. So did Paint Annapolis, the first time or two you saw it, you weren't a participant, you simply saw the artists out at work around Annapolis?
I would talk to them, and after after 2 attempts at not getting in, I got in. And
what year was that? That 3 was a charm.
Well, that's true. 3rd time was a charm. Well, it could have been 4. 76 or 77. No, God, no. 06 or 07.
And you've been a participant every year since?
Not every year, no. Sometimes I'm not out, and sometimes I mean, it is very much chosen each year individually. So I've missed some years that the juror liked something else instead of my stuff. So.
Okay. Oh yeah. Well, all of us have been down that path.
Yeah. So you have to live with that and come back next year.
In fact, everyone, David has been kind enough to hear my rants when I first started to enter, and would get very disappointed because I thought my work was so wonderful and the juror didn't agree. But anyway, so it's wise counsel from David. So this is kind of a segue. We could go one of two directions into what else we were going to talk about. And that would be your leadership role in our organization and what Paint Annapolis means to us. But first, I think everybody knows your work, but let's spend a few more minutes looking at a little bit of it. And so, Martha, if you can put up the slides just as David sent them to you, and we'll start talking.
Boom, boom, there it is.
Well, that's not much to talk about.
That was the most difficult one.
That was in your abstract expressionist phase.
That's right. That's right. Yes. So
All right.
this is a painting from Ireland. South, it was, well, as it says there, west of Ireland, but yes. And actually it's on my screen, it's a little washed out looking, but it was, it's what they call a safe harbor, that with the stone walls around, and they have very much tidal harbors, which means the boats end up like this twice a day, laying on their side as the tide goes in and out. They just roll over. So yeah, it's an interesting place to paint. That was an interesting going there for the first time. About 12 years ago, I started going there, and I've been there every year except this one.
So I'm struck by the palette and the very broad brush strokes, unless some of them might be palette knife as well. But can you say a little bit about that particular palette, which only has a few notes of color in the boats themselves?
Right. I vacillate sometimes, but I move from strangely, I use a full palette of color, all the yellows, the cadmium reds, oranges, and I use a series of blues and greens. But I do like a gray palette with just bits of color, because then it makes them more important. The small bits of color make an object more important by accenting it.
That is formally, of course, correct. All of us who are familiar with colors and complementary colors and contrasting and all of that. But are you saying that you made the choice of the palette, the more earthy tones for the rest of the composition for formal reasons, or was that the atmosphere, the light conditions, the actual scene in plein air on the day that you painted, or is it a combination?
Probably a combination. They were brighter greens. If you know anything about Ireland, of course, they're usually are brighter greens, and as are the colors. The boats were a bit brighter blue and green in the front. There was a conscious decision to gray back the background, the hillside there, so that for one, it didn't compete with the greens of the foreground and the subject, the main subject, the focal point.
So is it fair for me to say then, and for everybody else to understand about your work, that even though you're primarily a plein air painter and very often completing your paintings or working them up very to a high level out of doors, that you're not literally reproducing nature when you paint? There's something that is at a different order that you're attempting to realize, not just a transcription of nature.
Right. That was a long little trip too. Not your sentence, but my getting to here, because I started, when I first went out and painted, I would spend 3 days sometimes on a painting, going back the same time each day for 2 hours at that same time. And then I thought, well, no, that wasn't what I wanted to do. So I slowly, it morphed into, which I think it works for everyone there who paints in plein air and even studio work. It changes, and it changes either as you work, or it changes in a determined fashion. So as you grow and change, I've decided that I don't want to see, which I used to do. Some of them were, yeah, maybe there were a couple of pieces, probably early ones, that are close to some trumpet items in them, and I just decided that there's a camera for that.
Yes.
And so interpretation of either the images or interpretation of the day and the feel of the day. Sometimes I'll throw in certain colors just because I want to feel that heat of the day rather than just warmer colors instead of cool colors.
So every one of your canvases that
Yeah.
you show to the rest of us is more of an expression of yourself, maybe your reaction to the scene or your overall kind of emotional, mental state at the time you're working, rather than a straightforward transcription, a realistic depiction of the scene.
Right. Now, the realistic, I guess,
Well, it's realistic in the broad sense, but not in a
more realistic part. There are the images of the objects, but they're just part of this whole feel of what this bay was, this little safe harbor.
Okay.
So yes.
Let's look at the next image and sort of keep all of these things in mind, because this is Annapolis. This is our town, which we've all seen so often. But I think it's not the way that I see it through my camera lens, or the way that I think of it if I sit, in my home and think about the State House and the Maryland Inn. So could you say a little bit about what's going on here, why the palette and the sort of atmospheric quality of this image?
Well, in the last few years, I've been working with the concept of that a particular spot, particular part of the canvas, not, instead of capturing the whole thing, capturing a feel of it, but having a main portion, as the dome might be in this painting, the focal point, but to have everything else. There's no really other building there. One thing blends into another,
right?
So that they start to look like buildings, and even the traffic is not. It's just three lines of, in the blue car in the front, just 3 lines of 2 light ones and a dark one. So I didn't want the focus to be down there. I wanted people to realize it might be there, but the light hitting on a building, the spire of our Capitol building, was the feel I was going for. It was trying to get a more diffused emotional feel about the place rather than the exact.
Yeah. Is there anything theoretical? And by that, I mean anything that you've read that some other artist may have said, or in a broader sense, another artist that you particularly admire and look at their work for inspiration? Or is there anything like that that's happening? Or is it just you and your paints, your canvas, and the scene in front of you?
I think it's both, because you were always looking at other people's work, and whether it's on purpose or accidental. You're always seeing other people's work and saying, "Oh God, I like the way that happened," or "I like the feel of that." But I guess as this is just moving on to the same thing I left when I left the realistic, complete, detailed image. Moving to move away from specifics and get to an idea of the place.
Yeah.
And I actually did one down at Art Walk for Cynthia McBride that was very, very simplified, that I don't have with me right now, but or it's not on those slides, but it was even more deconstructed.
Yeah.
Because while you look at this and people go, "Oh, I know that corner, I know those buildings." Well, you think you know those buildings because that one building is not necessarily there. There was light on the wall, but it became almost another building there. So people would assume everything they're looking at is real. If they stood downtown, they might not see it that way.
I think, Bill, David, I really like this, and I don't think I had seen it before until you sent over the slides. And I think that's part of the reason that I like it, because I know it's not really what I would see if I stood on church circle and looked towards the State House dome. And so it's much more personal, you know, that knowing you, that means it's personal to me in a different way than if you were unknown to me. But also, I think it's much more evocative. And so I really like it. When did you do this, roughly?
The beginning of, it was February.
Okay, this February?
Yeah, before everything, January, before everything happened.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, well, we have a couple more slides, and I do want to share them all with everybody who's watching today before we talk a little bit more about the MFA and Paint Annapolis. So, Martha, if you could show us the next one. Well, that is not Annapolis, I can say that.
That's East Street. You just have to catch it the right time of day. No, it's yes, that is Cortona in Italy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's just a really great capture of that glowing golden Italian light. And this is a little more the way I think of your work. If somebody just mentioned your name in conversation and you weren't present, this is the kind of thing that would come into mind. Would you say that you've always painted in this way when you're before nature and the sunlight is bright and you have the bright colors in the foreground and middle ground, as you mentioned in the first slide? Would you say that more of your work is like this or like the previous image?
Probably more is similar to that, with just simplified shapes, but with a bright spot of light, as is the yellow. And actually, if you look at the painting carefully, it is all there. It's all grade colors except for that light on that specific building.
Yeah.
So it follows how I do things now. It's just not as, it's a little higher key.
Yeah. Martha, next slide, please. Okay, you exclaimed when this popped up, so you start talking without me.
I've forgotten. No, it's not like I forgot it was in there. I just, oh yes, because I do like backlit stuff too. Backlit and the calligraphy of shapes and lines in dark shapes and lines against that grayed sky and cloud.
Well, this is the kind of thing that I very much enjoy in my own photography. The same kind of thing, you know, where you have these very emphatic shapes, but all the atmosphere and color around them it makes that contrast. I don't think I'd ever seen anything quite like this. So this is, I hope everybody else is feeling the same way. You're getting to know David's work a little more broadly. And since it's all fairly recent, this is where David's going right now as an artist. So would any of these that you've been showing us appear in Collector's Choice this year, do you think?
I don't know. Actually, actually, several of the ones that you just, actually maybe all are in McBride's gallery right now. Because
I should take a walk down there.
Take a walk down there. Yes, enjoy the stroll. Yes.
All right, let's. How many more are there? One or two more? Martha?
She's counting. This is, yeah. Whoop.
Well, that's a nice contrast. It's too bad we didn't set them up so they could both be on the screen at the same time. This is a whole other direction. This is even more broadly applied and
right. Which is, this is more this is the if you combine all this as a mind does, as a mind will do, you absorb some, you change it, you go back up forward 3 steps, and then you go back a couple, and then you keep going in. So this is part of that progress. You'll see the bold strokes, which from a distance will look like the light on the grass, but it's just big pieces of palette painting.
Yeah.
Palette knife.
Well, I think this is just great. I really like this one. But the next one, Martha, this is, to me, Whistler. You know, as a historian of American art, I see water and the moon or the sun coming through the clouds like that, and the very narrow palette range except for the blue and the sky, maybe adding a little more dimension to the palette. Is Whistler of any particular interest to you or inspiration to you?
I do like Whistler, and I like he had those stark colors often too. But this is a pastel also.
Is it a pure pastel or is it one of those pastel pencils or?
No, it's soft pastel.
Soft pastel. Do you do a lot of pastel?
I do not as much as I used to. I used to travel with pastels. Now I just take my paints. But yes, yes, it depends on the subject sometimes.
Uh-huh.
And the feel. There's a certain textural feel you get with pastels that you can't necessarily get with paint.
Well, I don't know if that's what you're referring to in this image or not, but to me, it's almost like the atmosphere has become tactile, like, you know, a heavy, moist atmosphere over the water. So it's one of those instances where the medium and the subject all come together so well. I mean, this is great.
Thank you.
Is there one more, Martha? Nope. Okay, well, that gives us all a kind of a broad view of what David is doing recently and the different kinds of concerns he has as an artist, the way he develops his work. So let's talk a little bit, we'll go right to Paint Annapolis so that we
First, can we applaud David's display? I thought that was terrific.
Yeah, thank you, Sandy.
Wonderful show.
Yeah, that was great.
Actually,
thanks for bringing that up, Sandy.
I had sent two from Argentina, but I guess they didn't come through. So yeah.
Yeah, I thought there were one or two more also, but that's all right. We're running out of time to start talking about Paint Annapolis.
Yes.
Why do you, as an artist, want to participate in Paint Annapolis? What is it that it means from a purely working artist point of view to you?
It's strangely, it's not the competitive spirit. I like to paint. If you paint, I don't like to paint in a vacuum necessarily. That's why I paint on the street and outside instead of the studio a lot. In the last few years, if I'm changing something, and this is probably counterproductive because you are there to also make sales and do that sort of thing financially, I will use these events as a tool for changing something, because you're spending 4 or 5 days in a row, maybe doing 2 or 3 paintings each day. So if you want to change something, you have the time and intensity for doing that, and it will work. You're kind of like, you put enough paint and change in your information where it slowly starts to change. You can use it as a learning process while producing a piece of work. And for me, that works.
Well, let me make sure I understand this, because that sounds like what I thought you might say, but I'm not sure, as you said it, that you really mean what I thought it would mean. What I thought you would say was something along the lines, well, I'm with all these other artists and we look at each other's work and we talk with one another, we go out for drinks or dinner, and you know, that leads me to change. But it sounds like you're saying that you come in the process of changing something about your work, and this makes you do it rapidly. Is that what you're really saying?
It gives me the time, because, you know, we're supposed to be on the street painting. We're supposed to be out there, and you have a week, and all of a sudden you get in your mind, I can do 3 or 4 paintings, 2 or 3 paintings. And that concept you were trying to work with starts to come under your hand, under your brush easier. It's not so much the discussion with the artists and all. No, that's discussion with artists. We have art talks, critiques in our heads and back and forth. That's exchanging knowledge and a feel for art, pretty much.
Does the competition, and I only mean that as a descriptor, not the sense of competition, and the presence of the other artists, is that any part of why you participate in Paint Annapolis, or that you would say to another artist who's thinking about it, oh yes, this is a big benefit of participation?
Oh, I know this is going to sound odd, but in that flow, what was the question?
Is it the chance to see other artists at work, see their work, and talk to them about their work a benefit of participating in Paint Annapolis?
Yes, I think it is. I think it is all of that. And also, since we've taken over, Paint Annapolis has expanded to include not just this urban thing, but we can send people out to the countryside to paint. It's a more of an open choice. People can paint well off anywhere in the county. So it gives us great opportunity. In some places I've painted in the early part of this last 17 or 18 years, you'd be on a 3 blocks of one city that you couldn't paint beyond that.
Yeah.
So I think it's sharing information, knowledge. Yes,
Yeah.
a lot of that. But not.
Do you have an elevator pitch for artists when you meet somebody and they bring up, oh, you're with MFA and I hear Paint Annapolis is wonderful. Do you have an elevator pitch for them?
But it's long. because I tell them, I said it's a wonderful, it's become a wonderful organization where you're pretty much allowed to paint as you wish, where you wish, within a couple days of framing that. And you will find that there is something throughout the area that you will love to paint. And artists generally who have not come here before have come back. They come back because of the subject matter, I believe, and the town itself. I think that's, and you'll find out more, I know, when you talk to Georgiana, because she's come back. She's been back a few times also. And she's also, I was going to say, the other thing is you do see, nothing happens in a vacuum. So you see you do see other people's work. Yeah. And I gravitate more towards seeing people whose work is very different from mine. I can look at my work and see it in others and see others in mine. But to see people's work, like Barbara Kennedy's and Georgiana, they have a different take. They have a different vision. They're both different. They're both excellent. And I think the diversity that we now bring to this show is bigger than some others.
Well, we've kind of filled up the time. As I said, you and I would not have any difficulty filling up the time. So let's try to wrap it up and leave time for Q&A. Is there a quick way you, as the president and leader of the MFA, can say something about what the Paint Annapolis has meant to MFA as an organization?
A big thing, actually, and it's slowly happening more. But when I first started with MFA, it wasn't like there were like 3 shows going on, and then it grew to more shows that we had in-house. And I would even talk to some of the merchants on the corner opposite us and have to explain to them who we were. now we have people who come and they know us. We are on the street. If we try to connect it more, we have more people visiting. We're doing more of these talks where people who aren't just artists, but they are showing up. So it's changed, I think, kind of greatly. You still might say MFA, but now I say, MFA up Chancery Lane. It's got the gate and it said, oh yes, I've been there. So it has more name recognition, it's people recognition, and I think some of it's because it shows a wider diversity now too than it did.
Yeah.
It's just grown. It's grown like everything should grow.
Yeah. And now, if Sandy's still there, I want to offer a brief round of applause to David for leading us through this, because I'm a photographer and I benefit from Paint Annapolis as a member of the organization, because just what David said, people know us now and they see what we bring to the community. So David, thank you very much for that. Okay, well, we have chatted enough. And we'll have plenty of opportunities, you and I, to chat again about some of these things. So why don't we open it up now for questions? Just raise your hand and Martha will unmute you and you can ask your question, or you can send it through the chat, right, Martha? Okay.
You're also welcome to hit the reactions tab at the bottom of your screen, where you can use either the thumbs up or the clap emoji, and I'll try and find you that way.
Okay, there you go. So I know we didn't cover everything.
I just happen to explain myself enough that no one needs any more.
Well, I want to point out that we have at least 3 Paint Annapolis artists on the call. We've got Georgiana Lenson that you're going to talk to in 2 weeks. You're talking to Matt Barbara Kennedy next week. We have Jackie Clark, who's from New York. Georgiana's from Pennsylvania. And Carol Cowie, I saw, is on the call. I'm not sure if there's anybody else with paint who's going to be painting, but I just wanted to point that out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne. Now, this can't be that no one has any questions. How many have we done? About 8 or so of these, and there's always somebody. Sandy, did I see you want to?
I do have a question about a painting that David showed, if that's acceptable.
Yeah.
Point. It was the downtown Annapolis New Day, I believe, is what you called it, David.
Oh,
That one. Yeah, right. New Day. And what struck me about this was how I sort of missed what you were saying about the building on the left in the middle ground with the light on it. That was such an important part of the painting to me.
right.
And you imported it into the landscape from elsewhere because it's not part of the actual scene.
It's actual light coming through the buildings.
Yes.
Hitting a building, but
Yeah.
the building it has more of an angle than it does if you were actually there.
Oh, okay.
And it's a structure. It's like that blur of green and blue and purple in the middle there. That's
that has the street lamp
right.
perceptible in the middle of it.
It has 3 shops there, 3 or 4, and but it's more or less a placeholder suggesting buildings that allows you to push your eye up the page and see how high that Capitol building actually is.
See, it's hard from images because I think that they do tend to distort emphasis. And I take your word for it that it functions that way in reality, but the way I'm seeing it in the image, that's what's grabbing me, is not the dome, which is a unique architectural feature, but that very nondescript corner of a brick building that's got that wonderful light hitting it and the pattern of shadow on it. And it, to me, I can't quite move my eyes off of that when I'm looking at the painting.
Well, that is actually why I did stop at that point there. The light coming through there and hitting that building. Because I've seen it on the Capitol a lot. I just happen to be lucky every once in a while and the light is right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what it shows to me is how artfully you're capable of rendering the ordinary rather than being able to, you know, convey a really majestic architectural feature of the town. You've taken just this ordinary bit of landscape and made it just beautiful and compelling. And to me, it's the heart of the painting. But
Well,
that's me.
someone did tell me once. They said, you know, I mean, I was listening to a conversation. I was part of it, but not. They weren't telling me. But their point was, as they said, beautiful things are always beautiful anyway. It's taking something that's more mundane and creating something that's striking is more of the goal, rather than. I mean, doing beautiful flowers is always nice too, but they're already beautiful flowers. Yeah.
Yep. I think that's very important for all artists to think about, whatever they do with it. All right, we had a couple of questions that seemed to pop up through the chat functions. Martha, somebody asked about painting Alla Prima, or did you go back to the studio, or you want to talk about that, David?
I generally don't go back. Well, I do go back to the studio, but I just don't paint there. I eventually go back. That's where I live. So, but I tend not to. It's strange if you change. I mean, you can go back and I sit. If I have a painting that I'm questioning, I sit it on I have a big studio easel. I just leave it there and I walk past it all the time. If there's something that's awkwardly wrong that I think is wrong, I might do a little correction. But I find that if you start changing a lot of your brush strokes and concepts indoor, you lost what you've done outdoors. So I seldom do anything. Yes. I mean, I think that was the answer they were. I mean, I don't know if it was what they were looking for, but yeah, if I would do I would correct something that was distracting from the image rather than add something to make it somehow different or better.
Good, good. Okay.
Georgiana
Carolyn
Lenson
seems
has
to
her
be-
hand raised.
Oh,
I think she's next.
Go ahead.
So David, your work has become much more calligraphic since I first knew you 5-6 years ago. And I'm wondering who you're looking at as far as contemporary artists.
I think, Georgiana, it's a lot of people and little bits from them. And we have, I was going to say, we have a mutual friend. I spent a couple years painting alongside Ken Carley, our mutual friend. And I think, because we would challenge each other to paint something in a designated amount of time. And I could get started early, but that he would apply stuff that was so loose. And then I would try to think, how can I get that loose quality, those just lines, bits of something? How can I get that? And I go back, and even when I was looking back at when I was in Spain, there were a couple impressionist painters I didn't know, but there was a large Sorolla show. And I saw parts of his paintings that when you got close to them, they were bits of lines and all. It wasn't just beautiful markings. And I troll through the internet and I see people. There's an Asian watercolorist that is just this incredible person who has strong calligraphic lines and then almost floating color around it. I love to see those marks, those fine little bits of markings that people make with their paint. So I've been working on that for a couple years, just not to copy it, but to see if it works for me. See if I don't know if that
Yes, it does. It does. Your work has become, when I first met you, it's become less about representation and more about marks, or marrying the two. So I just was curious. I can never remember names of people I follow.
I know, and I gotta think, oh my God, wait, Jesus. Did I write something down that I
Well, this has been a great conversation, as I hoped it would be. David's work is very interesting, and he gave us a lot to think about, both what we looked at and what he said. But we are running out of time, and so Martha or Joanne, please correct me if I'm wrong. But what I was going to suggest is that people email any questions that didn't get answered, or any new questions that they haven't yet tried to raise. Send them to info@MFA, and then we'll pass them to David, and maybe he can get back to you, or David.
and Will, can I just answer what I saw it float by, and that was, I think it was Elaine's. And do I have a specific place I like to paint in the city? But that was yours, wasn't it? And I have to say, I used to hit the docks like I was some sort of wharf rat painting on something, but now I find, as I have in the last like 10 years, I like the alleys, I like the little vignettes, not necessarily the big open space sea with the boats bobbing up in the water, but some corner of the universe that no one has seen, maybe.
The more intimate spaces or hidden places.
Right, yes, yes, Georgiana has a quick follow-up. Wilkin.
What if the boats weren't bobbing, but they were sinking? Would you be interested?
Yes, I would actually. And then someone would shame me for not calling the Coast Guard or something.
Well, on that sort of upbeat note, let's end it for tonight. And thanks, David, for being a wonderful guest and a wonderful leader for our organization. And thanks to Joanne and Martha for their help tonight. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. We had a great audience tonight, and I know I really enjoyed our conversation. So again, thank you, David, and good night.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Night.